Hi, welcome to Reimagining Campus Ministry. My name is Jared Anderson, and I am joined by our Director of Campus Ministry at St. Mary's Academy, Alejandra Angel. So I teach at St. Mary's Academy. I'm a theology teacher. I teach sophomores and juniors, and I also serve as the Campus Ministry Associate with the responsibilities for formation and retreats.
And hello again. This is Alejandra Angel. I am the Director of Campus Ministry. I am also the Christian Service Coordinator, and I teach freshman and junior level theology. So the teams that I'm in charge of are liturgy and Christian service. So as we get started with our session, we really just want to give you a little bit of background on our school, because I think it will really make sense as to why we decided to go with this reimagined campus ministry structure. So to get to know a little bit about our school, we want to share a couple of statistics and really just demographics about our school, student body, and like what it looks like. So just a quick snapshot of our lovely students on the right there. But our school in general is about 51% Hispanic or Latina, and then 39% Black. We do have about 10% that is multiracial, Filipina students, Asian, Pacific Islander, and white. And the most important statistic about this snapshot is the very bottom part. 65% is Catholic, and then 35%, almost 35% is non-Catholic, which means that when we were thinking about reimagining our campus ministry structure, we really wanted to hone in on what is just a natural ecumenical community. So as you can see there, based on our student body, like who they are, their faith practices, we wanted to accompany our students, meet them where they are at. So this meant that we tailored our spiritual care to fit a very inclusive and ecumenical community. And we will talk about this later on, but we really have seen a growth in numbers in terms of students actually attending our programming. So our next piece is how we did it, how we reimagined campus ministry. Where did this idea really start from? The origin story of our structure that we have in place now. And there's going to be a lot of information coming your way. So the first piece is being intentional about always connecting it back to our founders, to our school vision, to our school mission, to the charism of our founders. We knew that obviously we're founded in 1889 by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and this legacy is near and dear to our heart. But we also really wanted to see how can we take this existing vision, this existing mission, charism, and always bring it back to our programming and to really our campus ministry department or structure. It's not just campus ministry for us is not just an after school program or something that occurs once a month at lunchtime. We want it to be a little bit more mission driven, and that really further on in the program we'll talk a little bit more about how we got that buy-in from administration and that support, but it's really connected to always having that connection to our founders. If you're not familiar with the Sisters of St. Joseph, their mission is really guided by this unifying love and the service of the dear neighbor. So it's using this very heavy language about reaching out to one another without distinction and this unifying love. So there in italics is their core mission statement, which is the spirituality of the Sisters of St. Joseph is rooted in the unifying Trinitarian love of God and moves outward to serve the dear neighbor without distinction. So as we move through today's session, you will see this language come up throughout our slides. And as always, we're very intentional about connecting it back to our sisters. And part of that is making sure we do our job as directors and to keep up with what they are doing, their updates as a congregation. Just this new sort of, they went through a chapter, or this process of chapters, acts of chapter, which is a meeting that they have every couple of years, and they really sit down and discern like what is working, where should they align their mission goals towards, what sort of areas of their ministry they want to be more intentional about. And we did that as well with this new restructuring. Um, and I have an example of what that looks like in the next slide, which is really a snapshot of their most recent, from the Sisters of St. Joseph, their most recent um, sort of areas of where they're committing to in terms of their ministry. So you can see a little bit about there. I'll just highlight a couple, but one of them is to deepen awareness of our complicity and work toward dismantling interlocking systems of oppression, walk with women as we claim our voice and work towards an inclusive church and society. So this is directly from our founders, the Sisters of St. Joseph. They are intentional about working in these areas. And our job as directors of campus ministry then, and as a school community, is to also live up to this, because this is the most, recent and up-to-date version of that charism.
So when we got together, I came on board and I had mentioned that I was interested in being part of campus ministry. Eventually, Ale and I connected and realized that between the two of us, I think there was a real dynamism, a real sort of synergy that was going on, where Alejandra is very much steeped in the spirituality and charism of the CSJs. And I brought with me a background. I had worked in parish ministry before going into teaching. And so I came with a background in pastoral planning and structuring ministry. And so we put those two together and really decided that it was a great time to restructure our campus ministry. And so what we had to do was first to stop and identify how specifically campus ministry fits into the vision and mission of our school. And I think this is a very important question, because sometimes campus ministry can be sort of taken for granted. Catholic high school, of course, it's going to have a campus ministry. They're going to do their thing. But we wanted to make sure that if we were going to be intentional about restructuring our campus ministry team and its organization, we had to be able to identify in very specific and explicit ways how it fit into the vision, mission, and philosophy of St. Mary's Academy. And so as we, sat down and started talking it through, we realized that we wanted to really form our campus ministry around four major focuses. The first one is alignment with our ISOs. And for those of you who aren't in California, I know that in California we have these ISOs, are integrated student outcomes. And it's kind of like a graduate profile that, by the time a student graduates from our school, they should be doing these things or have these characteristics. And so we wanted to make sure that our campus ministry was directly aligned with those ISOs, because the ISOs themselves are a direct sort of outflow from the vision and mission. We wanted to make sure that we were directly aligned with our mission statement. And the third thing is incredibly important. At St. Mary's, there's very much a culture of clubs and student organizations being student driven. And so we wanted to ensure that this would, be a part of that culture, and would really allow Alejandra and I to really be directors as opposed to being the ones doing everything. And then the last one was to have visible and explicit connections to our CSJ tradition. And so from those four focuses that we came up with, what we eventually landed on was a team that looked like this. At the center was the lead team, and those would be 4 students who would be selected in advance, and each member of the lead team would be in charge of one of the 4 teams that you see around the black center circle. And the 4 teams are named for the 4 areas from our ISOs. And so we have the 4 ISOs are live, learn, love, and serve. And so we took those and mapped those onto the things that campus ministry traditionally does. So our live team is in charge of retreats. Our learn team is in charge of formation. And for us as a CSJ school, that includes doing practices, spiritual practices that belong to the CSJ tradition, such as sharing of the heart. And you'll be able to learn a little bit about sharing of the heart from our Learn team lead in a moment. Our Love team takes on liturgy and coordinates liturgies. And then our Serve team connects and coordinates service. As far as, if a flow chart of how this works, you see that the directors of campus ministry, myself and Alejandra, are really animating the lead team. We do not animate the 4 teams of campus ministry. That's the job of the lead team. And so we animate and really work closely with the 4 leads, who then in turn work with their teams. And so that way there's leadership development that's going on, but also it allows us as directors to be directors and not constantly worrying about how the very nuts and bolts of how things get done. It's really a structure that puts a lot of trust in our students.
And just before we jump into this part, but I think that the structure really lends itself then to what we can see in higher education campus ministry. Like this is something more in line also with what we see at colleges and universities. So it's not something that is, super radical, but it's something that at the high school level is not really seen. Um, so the next really piece is, how did we cultivate that support? Um, Part of that is honestly just kind of like testing to see what works at our school community. And an organization, a student organization that really thrives is Student Leadership Council. Because similarly, like we will take elements from SLC, Student Leadership Council, for crafting our student application process and interview process and all of that. But we really tapped into that lead, which is one of our colleagues, Elena Landry, and she runs an excellent program. And we really met with her a couple of times to see, how did you get students to, agree to take on this much responsibility? That's not student government. And, what kind of programming are you designing? How do you get students to really take lead instead of you like doing most of the work, which, in education, it seems like often that's the case. So once we have that conversation, then we went really to our administration and presented our idea. And our administration, our administrator, Mary Rose Batimbakal, who you'll hear from in just a moment, really accepted our proposal and really has walked with us because she firmly believes in the mission of our founders. And as any administrator, if you can connect it to that school mission, that's like really the heaviest lifting that we need to do, because then everything else is going to fall into place, and it will, set the pace for the rest of the school year. So again, really checking to see what is working at your school, and that might be tapping into student organizations, existing models, see what really thrives, and ask those leaders, like, what did you do to get to that point of success? And then the other piece is having those very honest, transparent conversations with your administration.
And so right now, we're going to invite you to pause the video and scan the QR code. Our principal, Mary Rose Batumbakal, has recorded a video for us, really talking about her role in the process of restructuring campus ministry, and really her ongoing role in the spiritual and pastoral life of the school. So we invite you again to pause the video, scan the QR code, and take a look at our video from Mrs. Batumbakal. Okay, so Once we created our structure, once we realized what our focus was and how it was going to be really rooted in the mission and vision of our school, we wanted to design a campus ministry application process that reflected really the amount of work that went into creating this structure, but also was going to surface the best talent possible for the team. And we wanted to surface leadership. We wanted students to join um, who we wouldn't normally expect to be on campus ministry. And our team, I think, really reflects that. We also wanted to make sure that the process was inviting and open for students, and at the same time, reflected um, the commitment level that we were asking of them. And so you see here that we designed the process to really demonstrate the level of commitment that we were requiring of our students, but also was a process of discernment. We've got 4 teams, and we wanted to make sure that we were building the best team possible. And so we designed the process to be such that the lead team, along with the directors, myself and Alejandra, were discerning with the individual candidates where they could see themselves in the school year. And so after consulting with Lynna Landry, our Dean of Student Life, this is the process we came up with. It's 4 steps, and if it looks a little bit scary, it was a little bit to the students, but as they went through it, they realized that this was really an opportunity for us to get to know them and vice versa. So we started with a simple Google form, getting their interest, seeing why it is that they wanted to join. Once they finished that, myself and Alejandra, we scheduled individual interviews where Alejandra and I interviewed each candidate one-on-one. And again, this was a getting to know you. This was, gauging their interest and helping them to discern really where they would be best fit in the campus ministry structure. After that, we had an idea of what the teams would look like. And with the assistance of the lead team, we did group interviews. And it wasn't so much an interview as it was, we played a game. It's called Push the Button. It's from Jackbox Games. We had a lot of fun with it. But basically, in a group, you had to determine who the alien was, and you had to work together to figure out who the alien was. And in the process, Alejandra, myself, and the team lead were looking at how they worked with each other to really make sure that this was going to be a team that worked together. Once that was done, we sent out letters of acceptance, and we got started with training right away. When all was said and done, we had close to 40 applications for campus ministry. With a student body of about 250, that was quite a number of applications. And we have a team of, I think it's 34 or 35, including our leads. And so what I would like for you to do now is another opportunity. If you could pause the video. We asked 3 of our lead team members to record a video just talking about who they are, what they're in charge of, and really why they love being student leaders. Really, I hesitate to say student leaders. One of the things that I should mention is that Alejandra and I are very intentional about the language that we use regarding our campus ministry team. And so while Alejandra and I are the directors of campus ministry, the students themselves are the campus ministers. And that's language that we intentionally use with our team and with this school community. So if you could take a moment, pause the video, and learn a little bit about campus ministry from some of our best campus ministers.
So now that we've seen this application process Another important piece is setting the student minister expectations. So again, we've been very just vocal and intentional about saying that this campus ministry is not just a club where students at an involvement fair can sign their names and they attend a lunchtime meeting maybe once a month and they're in. But it's really about having that accountability. And one of the main things that when we start off training our students later on, once they've been accepted and all of that, is just letting them know that they lead always by example. And this is on and off campus. So just knowing that they represent our school mission, our Catholic identity, and all of that. Another piece is that, striving to learn more about their faith. Our students are not all Catholic, but there's this component about learning about faith and spiritual practices that seems that unites everyone, regardless of if they're Catholic or not. Again, it's a very ecumenical community that we have, and it's always about learning and just deepening our relationship with God. Another piece is letting our students know that they are, usually after a programming, we will have a debrief. So that being open to feedback and knowing how to give feedback is very important. So for example, after a retreat, we will have our retreat leaders stay back and then just evaluate like what went well, what didn't go well. Is there something that we could have done as directors to have stepped up, or just is there things that we need to change in the future? Because again, because this is our first full year under this model, we're really open to feedback. But an important piece for the team leads and for campus ministers is for them to know how to give that feedback to help their fellow ministers in the future. Part of that piece also is this, and I'm sure you've all heard this, but knowing when to step up and step back. Because as anyone knows that's involved in ministry, sometimes you do need to step up in those moments. If an icebreaker that you thought was 15 minutes is only 5, and then what do you do with that extra time? And that actually did happen, I think, at freshman retreat, where we had to kind of just improvise, and we watched as our students did that. And then the final piece, as with anything involving faith and spirituality, we need to take care of ourselves. And part of that is holding our students accountable for them to really take that time to nourish their souls before they can really minister to someone else. And I hate to be that cliche where we use like the airline thing with the oxygen mask, but it's so true, because we would hate it for our campus ministers by the time it's May, or even April, and they're done. They don't want to do anything because they're so overwhelmed. Um, for them to take the time to attend a program that they are not in charge of and to just absorb that, they need to do that. So part of that, the final piece of these expectations, is giving them that time for them then to take care of themselves spiritually, physically, and emotionally. So these are our student minister expectations.
Once we got the team and we realized, just how good of a team we had, to be perfectly honest with you, the next step was figuring out, okay, how do we train them? What kind of training do they need? And I think it was really important for us to wait until we had the team to figure out what kind of training we needed to offer them. It's important that as people in ministry, that we're responsive to the needs of our community. And in this case, we needed to be responsive to the needs of our team. So the training that we offered was developed after looking at the needs of our program. And we wanted to make sure that the training we offered was transferable, meaning we trained for skills, not for programs. So when we look at our programming, two of the major things, sort of our flagship programs that we have in campus ministry, are Sharing of the Heart, which is a weekly faith sharing process that's really rooted in the charism and mission of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And then the other thing that we do currently are our weekly prayer services. And we wanted, especially because we are an all-girls school, we wanted to make sure that we created a space for these young women to engage in ministries that they might not ordinarily be able to in different spaces. And so what we did was we said these are 4 major areas that we want to train them in: facilitation, preaching, which was really a brand new endeavor for us. And you'll see in a moment how much it's paid off. Accompaniment. How do we journey with each other in intentional ways and help each other on their walk with Jesus? And then the last one is witness, and that sort of goes to our retreats program. The other thing was that we wanted to be intentional about was bringing in women in ministry leadership to run these trainings. And so when we did a lot of our, the facilitation, Alejandra and I, we led a sharing of the heart process so they could see how it was done, and we would pause and get feedback on, okay, how to do this, what kind of questions do you have? For preaching, we invited an Episcopal priest to come in so she could teach our campus ministry team how to preach and what ministry looks like for her. For accompaniment and witness, we brought in different women in ministry, and it's made such a difference. And one of the things that I want to highlight here, especially, is our preaching. So we have every week, because we don't do student body masses, we don't live stream liturgy masses. We've done weekly liturgies of the word. And we have had students and faculty members, different people from the school community sign up to preach. And what I would like to do right now is to share with you the preaching, the reflection that one of our students did. Her name is Damaris. She is a sophomore. She is part of our engineering pathway. She is also one of our student campus ministers. And I've done enough talking. Let's just listen to her preach.
Good afternoon. My name is Damaris Rendon, and I am a Red Tie sophomore. In the gospel today, Jesus had preached to crowds for an entire day. That evening, Jesus decided to go to the other side of a body of water, most likely a lake. He left the crowd behind and left with his disciples on the boat. Suddenly, a huge storm arrived when they were making their way across. But after such an exhausting day, Jesus just slept on a cushion, not really minding the storm. As the storm was commencing, the disciples rushed over to Jesus and woke him up. "Teacher, do you not care if we die? We're in the middle of a storm here. What do we do?" The disciples kind of wanted guidance, like, "Help us, tell me what to do." Jesus, who seemed to be frustrated, wakes up and completely stops the storm. He says to the disciples, "Why are you so afraid? I'm right here." Jesus felt frustrated that they were waking him up. Not only was he exhausted after such a long day, he possibly felt confused and disappointed as well. He had cured a blind man, fed thousands of people with a few fish and bread. Yet after all of those miracles, his disciples still doubted and questioned him. Their ancestors believed for hundreds of years that Jesus would be some political warrior, and the disciples can't help but to ask Jesus for help to assist in the situation. Jesus waking up and asking them why they are afraid is inviting them to a new iteration of faith. An iteration is like a new version of something, but improved in some way. Jesus is always inviting us to a new iteration of faith, and as soon as we dive to the deepest into that iteration, we must start another. Jesus is inviting us to have a new perspective on himself each time with our new experiences of faith. My family is traditional with their faith. I have grown up knowing I was expected to believe in Jesus Christ and practice Catholicism without the push from my family. My family is not forcing me to practice Catholicism. I'm expected to believe without my family actually telling me to believe. My family has introduced me to Catholicism by placing me in situations to learn more about God, and I've grown to love my religion. These classes help me grow through my iterations of faith. For example, the way that I saw God in first grade is not how I see God today. I am currently in the engineering path program in SMA. The purpose of engineering is to find complications in something and find out ways and how it could be improved. This same knowledge can be put with their faith. To engineering. Sometimes people may have some problems with their relationship with God, and that's okay. People can outgrow their iterations of faith and kind of, like the hermit crab, need to find another shell. Another iteration is to improve their relationship with God. A problem in one's faith could be if they kept praying to God about wanting things from Him rather than actually praising and loving Him. One could expect that if they give God enough prayers, they could get what they prayed for, and that will be that. Engineering your faith means to always look to improve your relationship with God, to deepen your trust in Him. Jesus was expecting the disciples on that boat to trust Him, but that didn't happen because the disciples are still trying to cling on to their old iteration of faith, while Jesus was trying to invite them to a new one. Iterations help improve our relationship with God and deepen our trust in Him. Have you noticed the iterations you experience with your faith? What experiences have you gone through that developed new iterations? Have you grown a deeper love and trust in God as you realize that God experiences everything you go through? Thank you.
So now when we think about designing and programming, I think one of the main things is really asking, what does your community enjoy the most? What sort of spiritual practices or programs do you all enjoy the most? This is, a great starting point. But the other thing too is find something that really excites you as a campus minister and see if you can transfer that somehow at the high school level. And this can look like, several different things. Like, for example, I really love Taizé prayer. I think it's very centering and I love the contemplation of it. And, asking myself now, like, is it possible for high school students who are usually very squirmy to sit intentionally with Jesus at the cross and to have that practice of Taizé? And sometimes it might be like a complete like meshing of different ideas. But again, we're as campus ministers in high school, we are accompanying teenagers in their spiritual faith journeys. So our programming should be geared towards that. What happens and what is successful at the parish level sometimes is a disaster at the high school level. But again, seeing like what works right now already, that's a starting point. And just a little bit of guidance. It's always helpful to test things out at a smaller scale. I know for things like we've mentioned it many times now, but sharing of the heart, that spiritual practice, it's kind of like a daily examen or a weekly examen. We started to introduce that with our faculty and staff formations, our month or semester retreats. Like we would introduce that at a smaller scale. Same thing with retreats. Like if you're thinking about maybe having a weekly spiritual program, but you really want to test the waters and see if students really gravitate towards it and really find it fulfilling, try it out, have it be a part of a 15 minutes of your retreat program. The other thing too is collaborate with other programs and really try to ask them to attend your spiritual programs, because that's also the piece as Catholic educators. With our student leadership council, for example, our Dean of Student Life has asked them to attend, like once a month, sharing of the heart, or attend, one of the Friday morning prayer services. Students that normally wouldn't, but sometimes we see them come back because sometimes it's that exposure that really makes a difference. So again, ask what works right now and really try to like flesh that out. Find practices that really excite you. See if it works at the high school level, and just don't be afraid to introduce your ideas, but at the smaller level, to get that feedback, to really test the waters to see if it might work.
And, before we get into our next section, I think it's really important to mention that this sort of restructuring has had major implications for our school community as a whole. We talk about sharing of the heart happening for students. We do it weekly for our faculty and staff. And the process has been just, it's breathed new life into the spiritual life of the school, so much so that there are a group of us who are discerning becoming CSJ associates right now. So there's so many ways that it's expanded into the whole school community. We've hosted sharing of the heart sessions for the alumni. We're doing Advent Lent retreats for parents. I mean, it's really engaging every constituency at the school in such a way that everyone is growing together in their faith life.
And we lead into our next piece, which is, more of the practical aspect, like how can you visualize this happening at your school? And really just, if you want to pause for a moment and just take a look at this quote, particularly that final, those final two sentences, because I think this for us is our sort of guiding statement, or something that we might repeat as we move into this restructuring or these new programming opportunities. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. So one of the things, if you're considering this restructuring or trying to reinvigorate your campus ministry program, and just from personal experience, I this is my second year now as director of campus ministry, but last year was really about, I had this mentality of, let me not change anything and just see how it goes. But in the back of my mind, I just wanted to make things more student driven, because I was so affirmed while I was at Mount St. Mary's, and was kind of one of the student leads with my ministry. And I just saw the beauty of that. Like, in the long run, I'm a better Catholic because of it. I'm a better, minister because of it. But something to ask yourself is, sit with your current structure, even make notes or just write it all down. But ask yourself, like, what is essential about this structure that I have? And what really, really works? What not just draws number, but what does it feel like it actually, what nourishes the community? Because as we know, like some weekly programming, like it might be maybe 15 students that attend, maybe 20 students that attend. You don't need to have 50, 60 students attend to have it be successful, but those committed individuals. So again, what's essential, what works? And then ask yourself, like, if I were to change this, rename this, if I were to eliminate possibly this, is it going to just bring down my entire campus ministry structure? Or how would it affect, other sorts of structures that I have in place at the school? Is there room for additions? Like, what can be strengthened? Maybe even just starting small and saying, okay, the part that is most stressful is maybe liturgy. So if I try to strengthen that piece, then maybe I can bring on more students and have them be more involved, have them take more charge in that training, and then just bringing about those masses to fruition. And then also what we did with our Dean of Student Life and with our principal is getting feedback from them. Have they seen someone try to do this in the past? Like, what maybe was the hesitation? But really get that feedback from those trusted colleagues and administrators. And then there it's in bold, ask the students, right? Because if we don't have that student engagement, if we don't have students who are willing to support this or who want to be a part of this, new structuring, is it worth it to just completely redo it? Maybe just, again, renaming something, being more intentional about one piece of your ministry plate, that could really make the difference. So again, it's not just about getting the adults on board, but it's also about getting the students on board, because it goes both ways. They are the really like the breath of life of our community and our campus ministry program. If we didn't have our student campus ministry lead team, I don't know, I would have to do like 5 million other jobs. And it's not just to minimize like our responsibility, but it's really to give them the opportunity to be proud of the work that they can do, because they can do it. I mean, our school, founded by the CSJs, and it's about empowering young people to do all of that they can do and to reach that potential.
So the next step is to, again, just like Alejandra and I needed to stop and ask ourselves how campus ministry really intentionally fits into the mission and vision of the school, the next step is for you to do the same thing. And so what I would invite you to do, not now, of course, because this is a process. You would need to gather mission statement, vision statement for the school, philosophy statement. If you are a school that is that has the presence of a religious congregation or a religious order, gather some of their foundational documents or their their most recent documents so that you can really stop and ask yourself, how will campus ministry fit into the mission and vision of the school? And so there's two things going on here. Where does campus ministry fit into this structure that's already there? But also, how will campus ministry support the mission and vision of the school? Because it can be very dangerous for campus ministry to start functioning as a sort of satellite that operates somewhere out there that works independently from the school. It's got to fit within the already standing structures and at the same time support them.
And what we have here are two, so feel free to pause and scan these QR codes. But on the left is our student application. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. It is a Google form, which is very accessible. It's easy to track with the Excel, the Google Sheets and all of that. But it's just questions for gauging like their interest, possibly like what area or what team they would like to be involved in. And then on the right is our campus ministry application process slide deck. And really it's in a way sort of a summarized version of what we shared today, but it's obviously for high school students. So really just letting them know about those student expectations, what the process actually looks like, what the teams will do, and sort of what they will focus in on. So these two like work together, and really like these are our guiding documents for reimagining our campus ministry structure. But obviously these are specifically for students. One is the Google form, and then the other is that slide deck.
When it finally becomes time to build your team, talk to your colleagues. I think Alejandra and I were very intentional about building a very diverse team in terms of skill sets and 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 who we wanted to be representing the leadership of campus ministry. A perfect example, our live team lead, the person who's in charge of our retreats, team captain on the varsity basketball team. Like she brings a style of leadership that is very much a captain's style of leadership. And you contrast that with our learn team lead, Pascaline, who comes from Student Leadership Council, very involved in her church. She's got a very different style of leadership. They're complementary, so they can play off of each other. You really want to build a team that can play off of each other's strengths. It's really important to make personal invitations, especially for lead team. Just because sometimes students, they would never consider themselves campus ministers. And sometimes getting that invitation is the prompting that they need to try it out. And flowing from that, reach out to students who wouldn't usually think of joining. This campus ministry is a demanding organization at SMA. We do a lot. And at the same time, it's very broad in terms of who joins. We've got students who aren't involved in any clubs who are part of campus ministry. We have athletes. We have students who feel like they've got to do it all. And so we've got this wide swath of students from different areas of life of the school who are involved. And then once you establish your leads, it is so, so important to involve them in setting the teams, assisting with interviews, doing team selections. You know, if they're going to be leading, you've got to involve them in the decision-making process. Once you've got your team, time to figure out what kind of formation and training they need. So what we learned works best is train your leads first. Once your lead team is ready to go, then you involve them in the formation for the wider team. Don't be afraid to bring in experts. I can't tell you just how powerful those sessions have been when we've brought others in. It's so important because also realizing Alejandra and I both teach these students regularly. And sometimes it's important to have another voice from the outside to do that kind of formation. Make sure that you train for skills and not for programs. You want them to be able to use the skills that they learn in campus ministry in all aspects of their life. And finally, think long-term and plan for it. You've got to remember that you're building capacity. And so, you don't want a lead team full of seniors because once they all graduate, you're starting from scratch. So you're constantly looking at who's got the capacity for leadership and how can we support them into that leadership.
And then this final piece is about support systems, which is really crucial with allowing this campus ministry structure to stay afloat and to really thrive. But it's who is supporting us as director of campus ministry, like in our division, like who do we report to, like who is offering us direct feedback. Lucky for us, we do have our principal, Mary Rose Batumba, who is our direct support. But then also, like, how do we support our leadership team? So our different team leads, how often do we meet? Is it bi-weekly? Is it, once a month? Like, what does that look like? How does your leadership team support their team members? And really, like, these three just go hand in hand because it works from like the really like the top bottom. But with this reimagined structure of campus ministry, like we all work together. If we don't work together, if we don't communicate, we really don't have anything to stay afloat. So again, ask ourselves, like, who is going to support me? Is it just I get the green light and I'm good, or can I meet possibly like once a month with my supervisor? So all of this is really helpful when we think about these support systems. And as always, maybe something doesn't work out and maybe we need to readjust. And, instead of having like meetings that are just once a month, maybe it's like weekly meetings. It really just, everything is based on like what feedback we are getting from students, from our supervisors, from our administration. And we were just really open to that feedback.
And so thank you for spending time with us today. If you want to get in touch with us, we are more than happy to help you in your own restructuring and reimagining campus ministry journey. This is our contact information. You can reach either of us by email. And once again, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you again. There's our contact information. And also if you're curious to know like what sort of like specific programming works at our school, we'd also be happy to answer those questions. I know that today we focused on the actual structure of campus ministry, but if you want to brainstorm any types of specific student programs, feel free to reach out. We'd be again more than happy to assist you. And thank you again for being with us today.